Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Lead Center webinar, part of our Promoting Economic Advancement webinar series, Maintaining Employment Through Economic Advancement Strategies. I will be your facilitator today. My name is Elizabeth Jennings, and I'm the Assistant Project Director for the Lead Center. I'm also thrilled to have joining us today Abby Cooper. She's a subject matter expert with the Lead Center, focusing on customized employment and economic advancement. For those of you who are new to our webinars, the National Center on Leadership for the Employment and Economic Advancement of People with Disabilities, also called the LEAD Center, is a collaborative of disability, workforce, and economic empowerment organizations led by National Disability Institute with funding from the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. It looks like our partners from the Department of Labor Office of Disability Employment Policy have not yet been able to join us, so we'll hope to hear from them later in today's webinar. I'd now like to invite my colleague Nakia Matthews to provide us with some housekeeping tips.
Good afternoon, everyone. The audio for today's webinar is being broadcast through your computer. Please make sure your speakers are turned on or your headphones are plugged in. You can control the audio broadcast via the audio broadcast panel, which you see below. And if you accidentally close this panel or if the sound stops, you can reopen it by going to the top menu item, Communicate and Join Audio Broadcast. If you do not have sound capabilities on your computer or you prefer to listen by phone, you can dial the toll or toll-free number that you see here and enter the meeting code. And when you do this, you do not need to enter an attendee ID. And I will also paste this number and code into the chat box. Real-time captioning is provided during this webinar. The captions can be found in the Media Viewer panel, which appears in the lower right-hand portion of your webinar platform. If you'd like to make the Media Viewer panel larger, you can do so by minimizing some of the other panels like chat or Q&A and participants. And conversely, if you do not need the captions, you can go ahead and minimize the Media Viewer. There will be a question and answer portion at the end of the webinar. You can use the Q&A box or the chat box to send any questions that you may have to us and you may contact Elizabeth Jennings if you're listening by phone only at ejennings@ndi-inc.org. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and the materials will be placed on the Lead Center website at the URL that you see below. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, you can use the chat box to send me, Nakia Matthews, a message, or you may also email me directly at nmatthews@ndi-inc.org.
Thank you, Nakia. The Lead Center mission is to advance sustainable, individual, and systems-level change that results in improved, competitive, integrated employment and economic self-sufficiency outcomes for individuals across the spectrum of disability. Today's agenda is going to include the impact of financial stress on productivity, our current approach to employment services, as well as shifting the focus to include financial issues, needs, and opportunities in employment planning, how and when to address financial needs and goals, and next steps for workforce professionals and for organizational leadership. Again, if you have any questions, we're going to have time for that at the end of the webinar, but we also encourage you to submit questions throughout into the chat box, into the Q&A area, or if you're offline, to please email me, Elizabeth Jennings, at ejennings@ndi-inc.org. As a result of today's webinar, we believe that you will have a better understanding of the impact of financial stress on employment, the importance of including financial capability as part of the employment plan, the basics of how and when to talk to customers about their finances, steps you can take in the short and long term, and resources to support you along the way. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Abby Cooper to present, and we're just so thrilled to have Abby today, and grateful to all of you for joining us to hear from her. Welcome, Abby. And Abby, it just looks like you're on mute.
Thank you. I was just asking you if I was on mute.
We have you now. So much, Abby.
That's okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm thrilled that everyone has joined. And I have this first slide here on why is this part of my job? Because I think some of you on the line know very well why it's part of your job. And others of you on the line feel like, whoa, I already have so much to do. And now here's another piece that I need to think about. And I hope by the end of this webinar, you will realize there's some things that you can do that will help you think about this issue and will not be too taxing. And I just want to start with a very quick story in terms of why this issue had become so near and dear to my heart. This was many years ago. I placed a gentleman in the Bremerton shipyard, and I placed him out of a sheltered workshop where he was earning about 50 cents an hour to a job where he was earning $10 an hour. And for quite a while, about a year, life was swell. His job was going well, he had money, he was doing well, and then one day he just quit his job. And he came into my office and he said, I quit my job. And I kind of said, well, why? And he said, well, I get money anyways, don't I? I always got my Social Security, so why wouldn't I always get my paycheck? He had no idea that there was a correlation between your paycheck and working. And that made me realize that I had made a lot of assumptions that people know things, that sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, but how important it is to have the conversations. And I can turn these myself, right? Yeah. Okay. So first, let's talk about the impact of personal finances on employment. And this is nothing new because everyone on the line knows this. When you have a financial problem, it affects you on a very individual level, and it affects your work productivity, and it affects your personal relationships. And why is that? Because in our current society right now, you're viewed a little bit as not up to stuff if you have financial problems. And people internalize that because we all know that money is emotional. So if you have financial problems, you start thinking that some of it is because there's something wrong with me. And so you tend to worry more about it. You know, a recent study by the Personal Financial Employees Education Foundation showed that 1 in 4 employees are in serious financial stress. And we all know that some of this has to do with the economy. We all know that some of this has to do with the fact that people's wages haven't risen, but their credit has, and so people have gotten themselves into financial trouble. So one thing to think about this as we go through it, I'm going to talk a lot about this, is but how to make sure you separate a person from their financial issues. And on the average, this like blew me away when I saw the statistic, but on an average, up to 80% of these individuals spend time at work dealing with their personal financial problems. And in terms of wasted productivity, that's between 12 to 20 hours per month. And the reason to bring these statistics and the next set of statistics that I'm going to bring in is because this is everybody's issue. This isn't just the person who's struggling to figure out how to put everything together. It's the employer's issue, and you will see there's been an increase of employers that provide financial education and brown bags around financial literacy in the workplace directly related to that issue. And I apologize, I just switched the slide and I'm on slide 15. You know, and in 2010, the Federal Reserve study stated that employees' financial stress cost an employer employers, an average of $5,000 per employee per year in productivity. That's a huge chunk of change. When we go back to 1 in 4 people are dealing with some kind of financial stress. And then let's, extrapolate a little bit. Think about the folks that you care about and you represent and you're trying to secure employment for. Just in your head, think about how many of those people are dealing with financial stress. Okay. And those with earnings under $30,000, which is kind of a lot of folks that we place, scored high on the fiscal related stress index. It was 64 points, which means not only is stress high, but if you look at other studies, it also shows there's a strong correlation between that stress and depression. So it's an issue that we need to think about. And we know that financial stress impacts job productivity in a ton of ways. We know that there's increased unplanned absences. We also know that people feel out of control. Just think about yourself. If you've ever had a situation where you weren't quite sure how you were going to pay a bill and you had one of those fun-filled collection agencies call you, you feel out of control. And when you feel out of control, it's hard to focus. So employees are easily distracted. And it's kind of like that one ad about get digital TV. When you're easily distracted, you're prone to accidents, but it's true. When you're easily distracted, you're not paying attention. And then if we take it to a lot of folks are working jobs that it's incredibly important they pay attention because they may be around machinery, and it may be a situation where it's easier for them to seriously hurt themselves. And we already talked about this, but stress creates a high risk of health-related problems. So then we have unplanned absences. We have people not being productive. We have them prone to accidents. And then we put them at a high risk of turnover. Either they lose the job or they quit the job. And then where are they? Lots of times they're right back in your office. And we have all worked with people who have had multiple jobs within 1 year. And part of the reasons they've had multiple jobs is the underlying issues sometimes have not been addressed. So you go from one stopgap to another stopgap, and it never resolves the issues. And so people lose jobs due to low productivity. So now here's really good at stating the obvious, but the benefits of financial capacity, which I don't have to tell you, you all know, is going to decrease financial stress. It's going to help somebody feel in control. And when you feel in control, you're able to see that you have a future. When you feel out of control, survival is the only thing usually you can see. There's going to be less financial crisis. We've all worked with people who are so on the edge when their car breaks down, that's it, they quit their job. I have no way to get there. We've worked with people who are on the edge of losing their housing. We've worked with a lot of people that have no emergency savings whatsoever, and life is always a scramble. So the greater motivation to push through the challenges at a new job presents, because we all know a new job is stressful, when you're in a little bit more financially secure situation. You know, with better budgeting, it helps people face the drop in Social Security or other public benefits, or it helps people think about how to use public benefits and Social Security as a way to augment their income. So maybe I'm somebody who really, in order to meet all my expenses, I need to make more money than actually at this point I truly can. So then what's the conversation about how do we use your Social Security or how do we use your other public benefits to kind of augment the amount of money you have so that you get through, you're okay. And, you know, I think about I think about these conversations, and I think about this old blues song that says, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. And I think about that on money. We all want the people we represent to be financially stable, to have financial capacities, but none of us want to talk about money. So we need to kind of think about how we switch that equation a little bit. And research demonstrates that employees who are able to manage their finances are more productive. Well, that's just a given. If you think about your own life, you know that's true. And one company found that profits increased by $450 annually for each employee who had improved his or her financial behaviors. So let's just think about that for a second. Because most of the time in this webinar, I'm going to talk about how you can help and how we can think about supporting the job seekers, the people we represent. But we can also help companies. We can also help employers think about this fact and think about what they can provide to their employees, because in the end, they're going to be financially better off by doing that. So it's just kind of thinking of the whole equation from 360 degrees, because in reality, it's everybody's issue. So how do we get there? How do we help those we serve, first of all, move forward from high financial stress, financial crisis, or limited financial security to being financially and fiscally capable without magic? Okay. One way that we do it is we start talking about money. And talking about money is complicated. And it can make us uncomfortable because it is emotional. And for most of us, we grew up with a whole ton of judgments around money. I'm sure some of you, like me, heard from your mother, money doesn't grow on trees. Why are you buying that? But think of all the different money messages you got all through your life. And most of them tend to be somewhat simplistic, and they tend to lead you to being judgmental. So I just want to show this, if I can pull this quick video, that one, because I think it's humorous, and two, because it makes my point. Elizabeth, can you help me? For some reason, it's not working. Okay, well, I can't get it to work, so I would suggest that you guys watch it when you can. There's another assumption that we hold around money, and it's that work will be the answer. That if a person gets a job, then they'll be okay. And we've kind of forgotten in today's society how complex everything has become. And if you look at the huge movement that's going on now about minimum wage and about people demanding higher wages because they can't live on minimum wage, that we know that the assumption that just getting a job will take care of everything just truly is not true. And there's some thinking that we've gone through in our head that, everyone starts somewhere. And I know that other people on the line have said that to customers they represent, as I have. And that's fine. Everybody does start somewhere, but everybody also needs some help figuring out to get to the next plateau. Another thing that we tend to think is, well, the job market's tight right now, so take what you can get, and then you can move forward. Or people can augment wages with public benefits, which is true. People can. But then we want to think about how long do we want to set up that, and how do we want to help people move forward. And a person, most of the work I do is with folks with significant disabilities. And most of the people I work with have limited understanding of money. That does not mean they don't know what they want. That does not mean because you have limited understanding of money that you shouldn't have a financial life. We've also tended to forget that wages do matter. We get so focused on a job that we think that that's the end all. You'll live happily ever after if you have that job. But in reality, wages do matter. There isn't a person on this line, when they accepted their job, they didn't think about, can I afford to take this job? Will this job cover my rent? Will it cover my car payment? Does it have health insurance? Can I save any money? These are just basic things that you thought about when you accepted your job. And depending on where you are in your career and how many people depend on your income, the questions became broader. And if you decided you wanted a job that didn't pay as much, then you also had to think about, okay, well, what am I willing to cut out for? You know, what am I willing to change in my income so I can afford to take this job? It's kind of like we need to help job seekers think about the same things. Think about how much they need to earn to cover their expenses now and in the future. That doesn't mean, hopefully, that we're there in the future. It more means that we help them think about it so that they have a plan. And if we go back to the fact that the reality, one thing I love about talking about money and helping people think through it is it gives them power. It gives them control. And so it doesn't mean I'm going to be there in your future when you get that job that allows you to live the lifestyle you want. But it does mean I can help you go on a pathway. I can put you on a pathway to financial stability, and you have a plan for the future. So I'm on slide 22, too. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to say what slide I'm on. So from my perspective, our current system looks like this. Probably with a few more loop-de-loops in it, but there's limited conversations on financial stability, and there isn't a person on this line that doesn't know that financial stability is personal. It all depends on where you are in your life. You know, there's some people on this phone that want to buy a new car. So they're figuring that out, and that factors into financial stability. There's other people that are figuring out, how the heck am I going to put my kids through school? And so that factors in. There may be some people on this line that are thinking, how the heck am I going to afford a new wheelchair? And that all factors into what you personally view as financial stability. And we don't ask people that. We tend not to have those conversations. We tend to focus a lot more on the job development. What type of job do you want? Let's see what's available, and let's see how we can get you that job. So obtaining the job is what's essential. That becomes the driver. So if we're lucky, employment is secured. And if we're lucky and the person's lucky, sometimes it's a living wage. Sometimes it's a great job. But if the person has more complexities and less contributions for an employer, it frequently isn't. And the case is closed. For a lot of folks, they're still poor or they're working poor, and the job doesn't cover their expenses. So what happens? Lots of times individuals return for another job, or they're laid off, or they're fired, because we kind of focus too linearly on just the job. So when do we talk about money? When do we help people understand what are the elements they should be thinking about? And I think that we try to think about how we integrate it into everything we do. And we do tend to be uncomfortable about talking about money. We're afraid we're being intrusive. We're afraid that somebody's going to think we're a financial advisor. We think, well, you know, we're not that hot with our own money, so what right do we have to talk to anybody else about money? And it's just that we just have to start the conversations to help people start thinking about it for themselves and letting them know where the resources are and what strengths they already have that they can build on. You know, our approach with around money pretty much has been a little like teaching somebody how to diet before you teach them how to cook. I mean, we're all really good at saying you should budget and not have the conversation about, well, what do you need from employment? What do you need from money? Where do you want to be a year out from now? So traditionally, we find when it comes to money, it's easy to be judgmental. We're pretty comfortable about talking about money, about budgeting. But we're not comfortable, or we don't tend to talk about how a budget can make life easier. If you just came to me and talked about, okay, Abby, I want to sit down and do some budgeting with you, I would kind of think, I want to go stick a needle in my eye. But if you were to sit down with me and you were counseling me about a job and you said, tell me, Abby, what do you want to buy with your wages? Tell me what you want your life to look like financially. And let's think about how we can do that within a budget. I'm a lot more interested. You know, we tend to be reticent about what information and services the clients need. And one of the reasons is we just don't ask people, how can I help you? What do I need? And for anyone who's ever been in a financial crisis, if somebody asks you in a non-judgmental way, how can I help you? You're like, thank God. Somebody's listening to me. Somebody's going to help me because I am so confused. I don't know where to turn. And just that very question of how can I help you? What do you want to work on? And here are some resources can be very empowering to folks. The other thing we tend to do with money, and I think it's because we feel uncomfortable, we tend to neglect to make sure people understand what we're saying. You know, if I say it really quickly, then the conversation's over, as opposed to slowing down and saying, what did you hear? You know, what did I say that didn't make sense to you? And a lot of our uncomfortableness comes from not feeling secure in our own financial situation, or not wanting to cause harm, not wanting to give wrong information. And so it prevents us from starting the conversations. And I want to reiterate here, it's not that anybody on the line has to be a financial advisor. It's just that you have to open the door to have the conversations and connect people to the resources that can help them. You know, it struck me all of a sudden as incredibly weird because I'm a little slow, so I think it just struck me about 10 years ago that how in the world could I, for the last 25 years, be involved in employment and never had a lot of discussions about money? They should go, you know, hand in glove, but they didn't until I started thinking about it. So here's what we want, or at least here's what I want, and that's that we have conversations about wages, hours worked. How many hours do you want to work? And what does that wage mean to your life? I mean, what are the pros and cons? What are you willing to give up in order to achieve those wages and those hours? What impact does it have on your benefits? Oh, you don't know? Well, let's figure out who you can talk to that can help you think that through. What about taxes? Well, I've never ever paid taxes. Well, let's have a little bit of a conversation on what comes out of your check for taxes and how taxes work and how you can use taxes as a tool. You know, what are the financial resources in your community? We also want to have conversations in terms of credit scores. In terms of, have you ever checked your credit report? Why in the world would I care about my credit score if I'm just looking for a job? Because a lot of employers in my state, it's allegedly illegal to check somebody's credit score unless it's directly related to the job they're applying. But employers do it all the time. So, all right, I'm somebody who hasn't been employed for 2 years, and then I have a stinky credit score. My chances of getting that job just plummeted a little bit. So it's important that people understand that, and it's important that we think about when we do plans, how do we tie it to people's financial goals? What are their financial goals in relation to their employment goals? And that doesn't mean they're going to achieve them right away, but it means, what are the steps we want to put in place? What are the referrals to community support? And because this is my little diagram, life is perfect in this, so we're going to have the person has an employment goal that will result in a living wage. And I want to talk for a second on a living wage. A living wage, once again, is individual. A living wage is contingent on what that person's expenses are. So if that person thinks about that you're doing a plan with and you're thinking about work, they think about what they need to cover their wages, cover their expenses. What that wage is becomes what the living wage is. And maybe enough to cover their expenses and go out to dinner once a month. In Ireland, the way they define poverty is very interesting. They define it in terms of, is the person able to participate in regular community activities? Are they able to have people over to dinner once a month? Are they able to go out and participate in an activity in the community? Do they have enough pairs of shoes? They get very clear in terms of what a person needs to be integrated in the community and have enough money. So we have a plan, and the plan obtains a job that reflects both the person's contributions, their skills, their strengths, their experience, and their financial needs. And as I already said earlier, financial needs change. So they reflect their financial needs at that particular point in their life. And in my head, they're on a pathway to financial stability because we've had some of those conversations with them, or we've referred them to community resources, and so we hopefully don't see them again. And then they have a closed case and they live happily ever after. So I want to talk a second about tension systems, and I'm on slide 26. And the reason I put this girl in is one, because I just love her running away from the bear, but it's also how many people feel about their finances. They think they've got one thing, they think they've got it under control, and all of a sudden something new happens, and they're just running for survival. But what Kurt Lewin's tension system theory is that all environments, are complex and layered. And there are behaviors that pull us away and towards certain behaviors. So if anybody on the phone has had the fun-filled experience of trying to lose weight, you know that there's little tricks you do. You know that you use a smaller plate. And if you use a smaller plate, you tend to eat less. Or for anyone who's had the fun-filled experience of quitting smoking, one behavior you do that helps you quit smoking is you stay away from people that are smoking so you can't bum their cigarettes. So there's all kinds of behaviors that either pull you towards something or pull you away. And the way I see these tension systems connecting is I think there's small changes that we can make in the conversations we have and the services we provide that can help people obtain the desired behavior they want. So, everybody on this phone, even if you think none of this is your job, you can make a huge difference in many people's lives just by simply adding a conversation about money to your employment planning. And if somebody doesn't want to have that conversation, that's totally fine. But probably the people that need it the most will want that conversation. And it will lead to less financial stress for the individual. Okay? It'll improve the likelihood that the job seeker is securing employment at a wage that will meet their monthly needs. And for some people that are seeking employment now, that is an incredible gift. Also, identifying and securing connections to add to financial services to let people know they're not alone. But here are all these resources in the community, and there are an awful lot of resources in every community, is an amazing gift. And increasing the individual's understanding of their own needs in a way to meet those needs, because I firmly believe whether you're talking about employment or whether you're talking about employment and finances, you always want to build on the individual strengths. And one way you build on people's individual strengths is them knowing what their needs are and them thinking about how they're going to meet those needs. This isn't something that you do for somebody. This is really something you do with somebody. And the really fun thing about it is you kind of expand people's world and give them hope. So I think there's just 3 things that you can do that are super easy, that'll make it easier for your job seekers to maintain employment by decreasing financial stress. And put somebody on a pathway to financial stability. Make room for the conversations. Keep things as simple as possible. And really start thinking in your head, this is part of my role. This isn't really going to take any more time. And this really is going to help this person. And if you can do those 3 things, I think that is just wonderful. We're on slide 30. So when do you introduce the concept that employment should place the job seeker on a pathway to financial stability? And as we all know with anything, timing is everything. And some people are ready to hear things right at intake. Other people aren't going to be ever ready for it, and other people are going to be interested in thinking about this when you're writing the employment plan. But if you provide the job seekers with tools to evaluate what wages will cover their expenses, they have control over that. You give them the tool, and there's lots of online tools, and there's lots of tools they can add to their smartphones, and it seems like everybody and their mom has a smartphone, that will allow the job seeker to kind of take control. Because we've all worked with people who will tell us they need to earn such and such a wage, and it's totally arbitrary. I want to earn $25 an hour. I want to earn $50 an hour. It's not related to their expenses. It's not related to their skills, but it usually is related to status. And in our society, status is important around money. So people glob onto a high figure that isn't possible to achieve, but having them look at what their expenses are and where they want to go, then you can help them be a little bit more realistic. Or sometimes people glob onto a very, very low figure because they're trying to stay under the radar, either with they may have an overpayment with Social Security and they never want to have another one, or their wages may be being garnished, or they haven't paid child support, so they just don't want anybody to be bugging them, so they don't want to earn that much money. But just having somebody have some tools to evaluate it will help them decide where they want to go. And throughout the job development process, it is really important to repeat information frequently, because people need to hear information more than once. There isn't a person on this line that hasn't, and they get information that is new to them, that they just get it and life is grand. But you got to hear it more times. I don't know if anybody here has ever been through benefits planning training or work incentive training. You hear it once and you think, oh yeah, I got it, and you walk out and you've totally forgotten it. because information that's new to somebody, it takes a while to sink in. So people frequently need to hear it more than once. And you really need, when somebody's offered a job, I personally feel that it's our responsibility to really ask just a couple questions. Can you live on this wage? If no, they can't, it's like, okay, and you really want this job, how are you going to augment it with public benefits? Do you need to apply for food stamps? Is there any upward growth in the company so this would be okay for a little while, but then you could have more money? You know, what is your plan to meet your monthly expenses? And when a case is closed, or, you know, what other information do you need? You know, what is your plan if a financial crisis hits? Because anyone who's ever had a financial crisis knows that if you don't have a plan before going into it, it's terrifying. And also asking people, how are you managing your financial stress? Is there a plan? Would it be helpful to take a financial literacy class? Okay, I am on slide 31. So let's talk about money at intake and when writing an employment plan, because in my head, those are two natural places. And I think that the more that we can connect employment and being on a pathway to financial stability, the better off and the better service we are providing our customers. And asking questions on intake forms or entering into a discussion about individuals' finances is helpful. You may view it as intrusive, and a person can always say, I don't want to talk about it. But for many people, it is helpful. It's like, finally, there's somebody that can help me. And I was so ashamed to talk about this. And really helping people think about employment is a key factor in financial stability. Then we really need to think about how the employment plan reflects financial stability. You know, and really have some conversations with people. And that's not to say that I am not well aware of the fact that sometimes people need to accept any job just because of what's going on in their life. And that's a stopgap measure. You know, if you need to take any job so you can pay rent next month, that makes perfect sense to me. But we don't stop there. That's not an effective plan. We start thinking about, okay, once you've got rent paid, what are the next steps for you to move forward to be financially stable? So at intake, I think there's some questions that can easily be asked. And some questions related to desired salary. How much do you want to make? How much are you making right now? How much have you made in the past? What are your total monthly expenses? Would that wage cover it? Do you want information or support to better understand or manage your money? Is there any information or resources I can help you with? Do you have a bank account? Well, no, I haven't because, you know, they charged me late fee. They charged me overdraft fees so much it wasn't worth it. Well, are you interested in learning about second chance banking? We already talked about credit scores and credit report. You know, are there credit issues you'd like to fix? Nope, not right now. I just want a job. Okay, well, is that something you might want to look at later? Kind of thinking about, you know, how much do you owe? Just how much do you owe? Is it weighing on you? Are you worried about it? Do you want any help figuring that out? You know, what are your financial goals? And how can this job help you move forward? These questions do a couple things. One, they can kind of give information in terms of how to help somebody move forward. It also helps somebody start thinking about what steps do I want to take. And I think it's really helpful to know before employment planning starts, what does financial security look like for the individual? You know, what does financial independence look like? If I'm somebody who has never, ever managed my money, and people have always told me that I can't manage my money because I have a cognitive disability, then maybe financial independence for me looks like the fact that I get to have my own bank account. It's going to vary. Maybe the financial independence for somebody else means that they have enough money to buy a house. It's going to vary depending on that person. But have that person think about what does financial security and what does financial independence look like to help them think about how they want to move forward. And we all know this, and as you probably know by this point, I'm great at stating the obvious, but money's a trigger. Money's a trigger for everybody on this line. You know, there's some people that will be more than happy if they're depressed to go, go out shopping and buy something new, and that'll make me feel better. Or there's other people who get a lot of money and all of a sudden they want to take all their friends out. We all engage in risky and impulsive financial behavior, but hopefully most people on the line aren't living on the edge. And if you're somebody that's living on the edge, it's helpful for you to think about when do you engage in risky and impulsive financial behavior. Because if you're the type of person that as soon as you get money in your pocket, you're more than happy to give it to your friends, you're more than happy to buy everybody in the bar a drink, then pretty soon you have no money. And there's a lot of people who go to work and end up getting in big financial trouble because no one helped them think about when did they engage in risky behavior. And if having money means that they're going to do something that is more detrimental to themselves, like particularly if you've worked with folks who are recovering addicts. It's pretty important that they think about the impact of money on their behavior. And also connected to the risky impulsive behavior is kind of what does status mean? How does money play out status? Because we've all worked with people who have gotten a job and gone out and bought a new card from one of those shady card dealers that they couldn't afford at 25% interest. But it was status. It was, I'm working, I should have a new car. So just trying to make people aware of this so when they go to work, they don't get themselves in a bigger hole. And what financial goals does the person have or do they want to have? And to think collectively, how can those financial goals, or some of them, be addressed in the employment plan? Okay, I'm on slide 34. So if we move to employment planning, I think I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, but money needs to be part of the conversation. And as we develop the plan, as people think about works, whether it's individually, whether it's in a group kind of setting, but not only is it what type of wage needs to be covered on a monthly expenses, but really a person thinking about, is it reasonable that I can earn that wage? Do I need to return to school? Do I, what would that mean for me to have that wage? And to create a plan around that. Really have somebody think about what wage would cover their monthly expenses and have money left over to meet their financial goals, whatever it is, whether it's to save, whether it's to pay down debt, whether it's to be able to take your girlfriend out to dinner, whether it's that, as soon as you get your paycheck, you want to buy a particular TV. Whatever it is, what they are, that the person needs to think about that. And also, what will your first paycheck pay for? And is that reasonable to assume that you'd have enough money to pay all that? Is there anything the job seeker wants to save for? And what I really like to do when I'm working with somebody that wants to save for something, I really like them, perhaps because I'm really visual, I like them to get a picture of it and to cut it out and put it on their refrigerator so they know, hey, this is what I'm saving for. because it's tough to save. And for them to think about how much money is needed for financial stability, what is financial stability for them, and what's the job seeker willing to do to achieve that. You know, I worked with a woman once where when I started working with her, she was not working, and she enrolled in an IDA program, a match savings account program where the match was 1 to 8. And she wanted to save for a car, but all she had was her SSI income. So she went and she cut off her cable because she could save the money that she paid in cable. And in her thinking, I will be financially stable if I have a car so that I can obtain employment, because where she lived was fairly rural. And she ended up purchasing a car, and she ended up actually getting a job that paid fairly well. So it's like, what's a person willing to do to achieve that? When was the last time the job seeker checked his credit report? I really like to recommend people check their credit report prior to applying for jobs, just so that they can correct misinformation on it. And are there any financial issues that will impact the job seeker working? We talked a little bit about this earlier, whether it's overpayment, delinquent child support, garnishment, but those are things that they may want to think about and how they want to address them. On all of this, I would suggest, for what it's worth, to ask the person to write down, their biggest financial issues they want addressed. To ask the person to think about how the employment plan can help address one or more of those issues. And have the person create a personal action plan for what they're willing to do today, 30 days, 2 months, 3 months from now. And have the person mail it to them, because I think it is essential that it's the person's plan and not our plan. So if by mailing it to themselves, that helps. I'm going to stop for a second because I just saw a question. Okay, in my area, it's almost impossible to get a checking account if you have poor credit. Is there a way around the situation with second chance banking? Yes, there is. And if you can type in your area, then we can get back to you on who has second chance banking in your area. So we're going to talk about money throughout the job development process. And one thing that I think that we forget to talk about a lot is employer benefits. And it's weird to me because we forget to talk about it. And I think this goes back to, our thinking of, our role is to get you a job and life is good. But for most people on this phone, we all think about employer benefits when we accept a job. We may accept a job for less pay because it has better benefits. But lots of times we forget to talk to some of our consumers about employer benefits. And so does the job have a pension plan? If it does, how much does the company contribute? Is there life insurance? Does the employer contribute? Does it come directly out of your paycheck? Because knowing what comes directly out of your paycheck is very helpful. When, it kind of reminds me of when one of my children got their first job, they called me up at their first paycheck and said, I'm quitting. Don't they know I'm a teenager? They took taxes out of my check. You work on this, Mom. You call them up and tell them they can't take taxes out of my check. They had no idea. And sometimes that's true with some of the employer benefits. The employee, the person we represent, doesn't realize that. So we need to have conversations. We need to find out, our paychecks direct deposit, particularly if you're working with somebody who lives in an area that is dangerous. But direct deposit is good for everybody, even if they're in a totally safe neighborhood. You know, is there a provision for direct deposit into savings? Because everybody knows that if they if they have direct deposit into savings, it's a heck of a lot easier to save than it is when you actually have to put it into the savings account. Does it have disability coverage? Does the company offer short-term or long-term disability coverage? Most of these benefits you can find on employers' websites. Or in an interview, you can ask an employer, because people do all the time, what are your employer benefits? If there's an education benefit, is that available just to the person, or is it also available to the family members? Because all of these benefits can augment a wage, and you may choose to take a job that's less pay, that pays less, because it's better benefits. You know, does the employer pay for health insurance coverage? If not, how much will be how much will it be on a monthly basis? Is the premium deducted from the individual's paycheck? How much is deducted? Can a summary of the health insurance plan options be reviewed before hire? These are really important questions for somebody accepting a job to be thinking about. There isn't anybody on the line that would not think about this for themselves. I've never gone into a job interview where I haven't asked, when does your health insurance coverage start? Now, how much sick time, vacation time, holidays are provided? Can sick time be used when my kid's sick? Because if it can't, and I have 3 kids, I'm going to kind of think the pros and cons of this job. When do benefits start to accrue? I think it's really important we help people think through employer benefits. What other fringe benefits are offered? Are there stock options? Particularly when if you're working with people who are also on Social Security, whether it be SSI or SSDI, making sure that they understand, mutual funds, stock options, the impacts that can have on their benefits. Well, if they don't even know those are offered, it's pretty hard for them to know the impact it can have on their benefits. Are there bonuses? Are there raises? Is the raise at 6 months, do I get a raise when I'm done with probation, and then every year henceforth? Is there in-house training? Is there wellness? Is there shared compensation? Child care assistance? Policy to promote from within? Not every employer is going to have all of these benefits, but if you're aware of what benefits you need, and if you don't have any kids, you don't care about child care. If you're pretty healthy, you probably don't care about shared compensation, but you may really care. Do they promote from within? So just making people aware of what the different employer benefits are so they can start thinking about what they need. And remember, this all goes back to, how do I help you take control? And the more information a person has, the better control they can take. Another really, particularly in today's world, another important thing for people to think about is, how does the employer pay? Are there payroll cards, accounts that are established by the employer to transfer the employer's compensation? Well, if they are, does the payroll, because some of the new payroll card accounts also have a savings account connected to it. So if I'm somebody who decide I need to start saving and they pay by payroll account, I'm going to kind of want to know, is it a payroll account that also has savings connected to it? The thing that an employee needs to know, or a job seeker needs to know, if there's a payroll card account, the employee is allowed to choose the institution that will receive the direct deposit. The employer cannot require the employee to receive their wages to a payroll account at certain institutions. The employee gets to choose. And the employer can offer choices of payroll cards. They can offer direct deposits into the account of the employer choosing, or 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 checks. So this is a new occurrence. You know, I think it's been like in the last 5 years that payroll cards have become really popular, and some people don't know about it, so making sure they're aware of that. And I think that another issue that we kind of miss talking to people about, which is kind of weird, but we do, or I have anyhow, is payroll taxes. You know, a person needs to know about payroll taxes. They need to know there's a difference. For some people need to know there's a difference between your gross income before taxes and your net income, and the amount of money a person gets after taxes. And they need to know it depends on the deductions that they take in their W-4. So if I need a lot of money right now, then I'm going to probably take less deductions so I get more money, and maybe later on I'm going to change the deductions on my W-4. Or maybe I'm somebody that wants to get a ton of money back at tax time, so then I can put a chunk of change into savings. Then I'm going to do more deductions, but just helping somebody think that through. To understand that there's their employer benefits deductions that come out of your check, that there's Social Security taxes, which is basically 6.2%, and there's the Medicare deduction at 1.45%. You know, and there can be other deductions that are going to impact your take-home pay, which is insurance premiums, retirement payments, flexible health accounts, etc. So having somebody kind of understand that for people who have not paid attention to it is useful. So let's talk about money at closure. And I'm on slide 45. Basically everything that I've said thus far is kind of means that we're going to have to think about who in the community we can partner with that can offer the information we need, so that you can make sure that your job seeker gets the information they need. You know, whether it's on credit repair, dealing with debt, budgeting, work incentives. You know, one big one is reporting Social Security earned income so people don't get into overpayments. Who has financial education classes? Who has banking products such as second chance banking? Who has low interest loans or credit building loans? So I have really stinky credit. Well, maybe what I need is a low interest loan that builds my credit. But so maybe I need to go see somebody around credit repair who can help me think that through. So being aware of what's available in your community is really useful. I think it's also really important to keep stuff simple. Keep the focus on what the job seeker identifies as their financial goals and what he or she wants to know. For anyone on the line that's a benefits planner, or for anyone on the line who's ever sent somebody to a CWIC or benefits planner, you know, or at least I knew as a benefits planner, I gave people way too much information and their heads were spinning, and it wasn't really the information they wanted. And it wasn't until I asked that very simple question, what do you need to know today? And could address that then all of a sudden people started following what I was suggesting. So also, if we can make it easy for people to be successful. So if we help them think about shorter goals. And always with anything, and everybody knows this, we're going to start with the job seeker's strengths and build on those strengths. Because every person we see has strengths in this area. Sometimes you have to dig a little deeper, but those strengths are there, and we need to build on them. And we want to make information easy, accessible, and understandable. That's why we want to test something to say, if somebody something doesn't make sense to them, then we want to figure out how we can re-say it so that it's clearer to people. Most of us only understand what we need to know to get by. I mean, if the financial crisis in 2008 taught us anything, it taught us that. And people might not understand the financial system, but they do understand what they want. And so if we structure a conversation about what a person wants for the future, they don't necessarily have to understand all the ins and outs of money, but it still needs to be part of their conversation because we need to make sure the jobs are helping people fit with what that person wants and needs, or at least they're on a pathway to that. You know, I think that one thing we're getting smarter at is using technology. And I personally think we should use technology whenever possible. When we can label things with a picture with a smartphone to make it easier for somebody, can we do alerts? Can we help somebody set up alerts on their smartphones, reminders, notifications of low balances? There are tons of free financial apps that are like for budgeting, for credit tracking, money tips. Can we help people download those to their smartphones? Can we text tips to people? Can we make sure that our job, can we put on our websites useful, useful websites to job seekers? But to really start using technology to its fullest advantage. Okay, so I think I've hammered it home enough that a job alone is not enough. We want people to be financially stable. So we want to assist job seekers in thinking about a career that both meets their unique abilities and puts them on a pathway to financial stability. We want to ask job seekers to think about what financial stability means for them and how much money they need now and in the future, and what they're willing to do to achieve that. And, of course, we want to provide information on how to use public benefits as a tool and help people think through what are the essential public benefits they need, as opposed to having people think, don't touch my benefits or life will fall apart. And we want to provide resource information on financial literacy and community resources. If we remember that improving your customers' financial capability will decrease their financial stress and a major cause of on-the-job issues, then they're probably going to stay employed. That integrating financial stability into disability and employment services is really critical if we want people to be financially stable. If we have folks who have more complexities in their life, it is critical that we help them start thinking about how do we integrate financial stability. And, there are a portion of job seekers, many of whom a lot of you on the phone represent, who will never be financially stable without these conversations and without the community supports. And they will kind of be through a revolving door where you get to see them more than you ever wanted to. So I'm going to try to wrap this up quickly so we have time for questions, but I want to give you an on-the-ground example of Terrence. And he came into your organizations for employment services. He needed a job, just any job. I need a job tomorrow. And through the intake employment process, all of a sudden you learn there's some financial issues and there's some support he desires. So his case manager, job counselor, refers him to a free financial education class to be completed when he is seeking employment. So he gets that under his belt. Prior to accepting a position, his job counselor helps him create a financial plan that identifies how much he needs to earn, what employer benefits he needs, what he can change in his budget if he accepts a job for less money, how to use his public benefits to augment his wages, where to obtain free tax filing services, which tax credits he might be able to be eligible for, and opportunities to use his tax returns to meet one of his goals. So the outcome for this is, other than the fact that he lives happily ever after, he understands his financial needs, which is critical. He identifies financial goals. That is really powerful. He has a financial plan. So he knows what to do. He's not going to get sideswiped by those financial crises. He improves his money management skills and feels more in control of his money. He has a job that covers his expenses, and he knows the supports in the community and where to turn for additional supports. And best of all, he believes he can improve his financial situation. So that's where we want to get. And in slide 53, it starts with belief is critical. And it is. Nobody in the world gets to be part of the financial mainstream without somebody believing they can do it. Everybody on the phone, that was true for. And all really this whole presentation is about is we want to give that gift back to the people we represent. You might be the first person in a long time that believes a job seeker can be financially better off. And that encouragement is so incredibly powerful. It also creates relationship that allows for tough conversations. It allows for, okay, well, that doesn't quite make sense to me. Can we think that through again? So the belief that a person can and should be better off is just super powerful. Slide 54. And so your homework assignments, should you choose to accept them, is like what you can do tomorrow. You in your head tomorrow can redefine successful employment. You can consider enhanced employment services that support a job seeker to earn wages that meet their monthly expenses, report earned income to Social Security, and with supports if necessary. File taxes. I cannot tell you how many people didn't believe that, filing taxes doesn't apply to them because they didn't make that much money. And they're just throwing that money away. Apply for earned income tax credits and with the supports if they need it. Have a bank account. Connect to the supports in the community that assist with budgeting and financial education. If we redefine, if in your head you start thinking, hey, at least one of these things I'm going to incorporate with the folks I work with, that would be wonderful. What you can do in the next month is there's all kinds of really easy, good, online financial education classes, which are listed here. So you can introduce just a few financial questions into your job counseling. You can learn the community resources. You can create a handout sheet that kind of helps people understand employer benefits. And you can become familiar with the Social Security Work Incentive Fun-Filled Red Book, which actually is very good. So these are all relatively easy things that you could do in the next month to start thinking about this. And your leadership can do some stuff if they so choose. And they could be willing to try different and untested strategies. They could create a work group willing to explore what would be possible in the next year. You could arrange training for all staff on financial strategies and why this is important. You could pilot how to incorporate financial health into employment planning. You could think about creating savings incentives when somebody goes to work. Work with businesses to develop a joint strategy, because remember, this is everybody's issue. You could incorporate financial expectations and desires as part of discovery and customized employment. And I just want to go over real quickly some other resources to consider. There's a great free financial health assessment to assess a client's financial needs, and the website is there. There is a link to Living Wage Calculator. You could put that on your website. So many people go to work, and then they don't understand why they're so poor. And the fact is because these other issues haven't been dealt with. You could get a list of resources of the banks that offer second chance banking accounts, who provides matched savings accounts or individual development accounts in your area. And I also, which we don't have, and I'm hoping Elizabeth can help me, there are also 2 webinars that I was hoping that we would, oh, thank you. Elizabeth put them, oh no. NDI is having a webinar, I believe. It's on April 9th, which is building capacity.
If you could give me the ball, or ask
yeah, okay, great.
Keep going through. They'll be in just a few more slides.
Oh, okay. It's yours.
Sorry about that, everyone.
That's okay. It's fine. Okay. So, yeah. Do you want to talk about them, Elizabeth? And I'll turn it back to you.
Sure. Thanks, Abby.
Yeah.
First of all, Abby, thank you so much for your presentation. I learned a lot. I think you did a great job breaking this down for all of us on the line. So for those of you who might want to learn more, there's 2 upcoming opportunities to do that. One is through National Disability Institute. On April 9th, we're going to provide a webinar on measuring the financial capability of persons with disabilities. We're going to do this with our partner, Bank of America, and a panel of speakers who are going to define for you financial capability as it relates to individuals with disabilities and look at the fact that while there are currently some standards for measuring financial capability, they don't take into account some of the additional indicators that would be relevant when you're looking at somebody who has disabilities. So we hope you'll join us. You can access it through the link. Nakia, if you wouldn't mind putting the link in the chat box. Or you can also visit our website, www.realeconomicimpact.org. There's also going to be a webinar hosted by Workforce 3.1 for the Disability Employment Initiative, which is a product of National Disability Institute and our sister agency, NDI Consulting. So this webinar is on April 8th, and it's going to look at the role credit plays in the employment of people with disabilities. As Abby alluded to, there is significant efforts going on around the country and even in Congress to look at this issue of credit being an indicator of whether or not you're job worthy. And that's starting to become a real barrier to individuals who are interested in employment. So if you have a chance to join, you can register through Workforce 3.1. Don't be intimidated by Workforce 3.1. You do have to register to be a user, but it's free and it's a great resource, and it's what the federal workforce system uses to put out information and webinars. And then I also want to make sure you're thoughtful about our next upcoming webinar from the LEAD Center. April 23rd, we're going to switch to our employment series, which is going to run for 3 months. The first one will be on Section 503, connecting job seekers with disabilities and federal contractors through the workforce development system. So many of you may know there's a new Section 503 rule that's become final and is in effect, and it looks at making sure that individuals with disabilities are part of federal contractors' workforce. So this will be a great opportunity for you to look at how you can be part of that process of connecting job seekers with disabilities to those federal contractors. So we hope you'll join us. Lots going on in April. But let's come back to some questions for Abby. I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay. Abby provided a lot of information, and we hope that you'll take a minute now to plug into the question and answer box or into the chat box any of the questions that you have. One that came up is for you, Abby. It asks, are there, in addition to the links that you provided, are there any other kind of favorite websites or links that you go to for financial capability strategies and tools?
Yeah, there's a lot of links, and maybe what we should do is create a list of links and then put them on your website. You know, one link that I really like is it's not so much on strategies as it is just tells you the state of your state, but there's good information on CFED's website. So would that work if I sent you, Elizabeth, a variety of websites, and you could also augment it, and then we could send it out to folks or post it?
Absolutely, we could do that. So also, any of you out there on the line, if you have a favorite website that you use for some of these issues, I want to encourage you to send it to us. You can plug it into the chat box or send it directly to me, Elizabeth Jennings, ejennings at ndi-inc.org. We'll compile those and we'll post them with the archive so that folks can look at them, and we'll do our best to vet all of them to make sure that they're accessible. So
yeah, that's why I'm a little wary to just.
No problem. We can take care of that through the Lead Center. You know, another opportunity for all of you on the line today is if you have some of the tools that Abby mentioned creating, something on how to talk to people about the different things that are going to be deducted from their paycheck, or some links that you like to use to help people have some basic understanding of their money as they return to work, we'd be happy to also share those out to the folks on this webinar. So please feel free to share any resources such as that. We'll always be happy to make sure they're posted with the relevant training and be a resource to all of your colleagues across the country. So another question we have is, I'm not sure how to get my leadership engaged in these activities. Do you have any suggestions for a first step?
Oh, I have lots of suggestions. I don't know if they're effective, but you know, one suggestion that I would suggest is just presenting to your leadership. I don't know what state you're from, but I would go to the CFED site and look at information about your state and poverty level in your state, and then look and just present in terms of the impact of who you're serving and the impact it's having, and then have a discussion. And, you know, my email is up here, and if you want to go that route and you want to send me your ideas, I'm happy to send you back some suggestions and kind of work a little bit with you on it.
Great, thank you. Okay, it looks like that's all of the questions that we've had. The only other question we've been asked is questions about the archive and whether or not you can print this information out after. And yes, the archive will be posted. It will be posted with the transcripts and also with the slides, so you'll have everything there that you need. If you're somebody who thinks that others in your organization would benefit, you know, this archive would be a great resource for them. Abby really drives home the point and gives a great worldview of why this is so critically important, and some of the research that shows that incorporating this into your work can lead to better outcomes, particularly in regards to employment retention.
And Nina, who needed information on second chance banking, if you email me your email, then I will send you that information.
Great. Thank you, Abby.
Sure.
So on that note, I'd like to say thank you again to Abby. We really appreciate your time and your expertise today.
Oh, sure. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We hope you'll join us again next month, and we hope you'll take the opportunity to always email us in with any questions you have, any tools you use that you'd like us to share, and any thoughts you have about future trainings that you'd like us to create for you. We so appreciate your attendance, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.